You're listening to the Lord's Army Radio Dispatch. The Lord's Army Radio Dispatch is the audio branch of lordsarmy.org, a Christian training ministry. During this weekly podcast, you'll meet individuals on the front lines of battle with the world. You'll meet Christian leaders, pastors, and lay people, all of whom have been used to the glory of God. If you are a Christian, then we encourage you to become an active duty soldier and join the battle that's going on around you every single day. Come join the Lord's Army. Before we begin this week's radio dispatch, I'd like to take a moment just to mention our book, Lord's Army Radio not Lord's Army Radio Dispatch, that's the name of our podcast. Lord's Army Basic Training, a survival guide to the Christian faith. It's available right now on Amazon in print and ebook. It just launched on Tuesday, and we're pleased with the results. Additionally, if you'd like to host or to start your own book study, then we have a group study guide available for free on our website. Our book is intended, as you likely know already, to be a disciple-making tool. It has the gospel in it, it has some apologetics in it, it has church history in it, and then, of course, the core of the book is really a systematic theology. So it really is intended to be a disciple-making tool. And it does lend itself to that sort of group study format. You certainly could read it on your own, but and would encourage you to do so. But it does sort of work out if you got somebody who's on the fence or who has had questions about Christianity. That's really what it's intended to do. So if you're looking to start your own, if you are looking to start your own book study, just contact us at info@lordsarmy.org. If you're interested, and we can give you all the resources. info@lordsarmy.org. Now, you're walking home one night. You pass several trash containers. You would barely notice them except you hear a rustling coming from them. Then you hear the unmistakable sound of a child crying. You walk over to investigate, and you find a small child, a little girl, who has literally been thrown away by her parents. This is the exact situation Praveen found himself in.
When Praveen was first getting started, the first child he ever rescued from just abandonment was a little girl who'd been put in the trash. He was walking home from his seminary classes, and he found this little girl in the trash. And that has, led to 25,000 children being rescued from slavery since he got started.
Yes, even something as terrible as a little girl being thrown in the trash by her parents can be used by God to accomplish a lot of good. By the end of this episode, you'll see that what God can accomplish in others and in you is far more than you would have ever guessed. Let's meet that voice you just heard.
My name is David Miller, and I am the operations manager for Child Freedom Coalition. And Child Freedom Coalition works with some pastors in India who, for over a decade, have been rescuing children out of slavery and giving them new life through education, vocational training, and that's in situations where they can't be, reunited with their parents.
You may be wondering how exactly a child ends up in slavery. If you're like me, you probably assume that the majority of these individuals are simply abandoned or orphaned, but that's actually not typically the case.
Primarily, the kids we're dealing with are children who have, whose parents have run up some form of debt, and they take money from a loan shark, and the loan shark then, when the families can't pay, these are families that make $1 a day.
Right.
And in that situation, when they can't pay the loan shark back, the children are taken as collateral and sold to a rock quarry. They're sold into brick making, or they're sold into brothels, etc.
When I first heard that statement, my immediate thought was, who on earth would put their child up for collateral? However, imagine being so poor, despite the fact that you and your entire family is working, you're still so poor that you have no choice but to borrow money. If you don't do it, then your kids are going to starve to death. So you essentially take a gamble. You risk the very people you love in order to care for them. And then the inevitable. You can't make the payment. The people you're dealing with are completely scrupulous. They don't care about your plight. No, they just care about the money. So it happens. You lose a child to slavery. So what kind of evil, corrupt system allows for such atrocities? Well, as we often see, it comes down to theology.
These people are preyed upon as part of the Hindu system. And again, India is a really complex place. It's pretty fascinating because it's a country with nuclear power.
Right.
It's a country with a space program, and it's a country with more slaves than anywhere else in the world.
Wow.
And it's this combination of modern urban India and very, very ancient rural India, and they coexist in the same place.
India is one of the most important allies to the United States. India is the second most populated country in the world. And yet, India is also a country where more than 80% of the population adheres to a single religion, Hinduism. And Hinduism is built upon a theological structuring of society.
One of the things in India that is pretty significant is the caste system.
Admittedly, Hinduism is an incredibly diverse belief system. Like most Eastern religions, hammering out even something as simple as basic beliefs can be tricky. However, here's the idea. According to core Hindu beliefs, you are a soul, an Atman, and an Atman is an eternal being. You were never created. You will never be destroyed. You have been always, and you always will be. The actions of your Atman in your current body determine what body you will be given in your next incarnation. This is the concept of dharma and karma. Dharma is the ideal actions, basically. You should strive to achieve a perfect dharma, which means to always be truthful, to honor your duties, to be upright and honorable, etc. Karma is basically your cosmic debt. If you've done well with dharma, then you have a good karma score. Then your next body will be a great one, good family, etc. If you're really good, and you've been good for several go-rounds, then you may even be able to test out of this whole system altogether and achieve moksha. And moksha means you're so awesome that you no longer go through birth and death, but you just sort of get absorbed into the universal consciousness of all that is good. And if you've done so, the downside comes if you've not done so well with dharma. If you've not done so well with dharma, then you get punished in your next life. You can get born as a lower and lower life form. This leads to the caste system. In the caste system, not all humans are created equal, literally created separately. Some humans are of the Brahmin class, some are born into the Kshatriyas, and so on. This goes all the way down to the lowest class of human by the Hindu system, the untouchables. Now, if you know anything about modern India, you may be crying out right now, but wait, isn't the caste system illegal in India now? Well, you got to remember.
Passing a law doesn't make something that's existed for 4,000 or 5,000 years just disappear.
Indeed, just as the signing of the Emancipation Proclamation in our own country didn't suddenly make all races of equal societal status, paper promise to end the caste system has done very little to change the realities of life for those living in India.
You're talking about a country of 1.4 billion people in the last census, but on that census, even the Indian government left off 400 million people who are untouchables. So people who are not even good enough to make it into the caste system, right? Literal outcasts.
The reality is that theology dictates culture. Over 80% of the country still believes that our socioeconomic status today was determined by our past actions. A two-year-old in the trash can, you say? Well, she must have done something really awful in a previous life to deserve it. That kind of mindset does not just change because of laws, especially when those running the legal system are of that same mindset. As Christians, we know how evil this type of thinking is. We know that a child has done nothing at all to deserve the cruel realities endured by modern slavery. No child deserves to work back-breaking jobs at a rock quarry for 20 hours a day. No child deserves to be abused in brothels. Indeed, we recognize that no person of any kind deserves such abuses. In the Christian worldview, we see that every single person is created in the image of God. Because of that, each and every person has infinite value. Furthermore, we recognize that suffering happens on this earth because we live in a world separated from God. Since the fall of man, we have been born into a world that has suffered a death. Death is separation. We are separated from the perfect God, and so this world is not perfect. We look forward to a day wherein this world is made whole and restored to its full glory. We look forward to evil being cast out and there being a new heavens and a new earth. And we recognize that the only reason we are all spared from being cast out, all of us, is not because we're good enough. It's not because, we're just better than everyone else. No, those who are saved only because of the work of Jesus Christ, who saved us. So, now back to Braveen. He sees a massive need. As a Christian, he knows that what's going on is not right. Now what?
Imagine going home and you don't have 3 kids to do laundry for and yourself and your spouse. You have 1,000.
How do you handle it? I think it's this question that often keeps us from ever taking action. We see that there's some massive problem out there, but then we become paralyzed. The problem just seems too big, and so too often we just end up doing nothing. Thankfully, that's not what David and his team did. That's not what Praveen did. Instead, they made sure they understood the full situation first, and then they took action. So, did they just start grabbing up as many kids as they could?
An opportunity to rescue kids. One of our big things is you have to have the resources to care for those kids. If it's a matter of going in and rescuing, we could probably rescue 10,000 kids tomorrow if there were the resources to care for those children, and which is a mind-boggling thing. But if you can't care and then those kids starve to death on your watch, that's like there's a complexity there.
Right.
We have to be able to fully care for the kids that are getting rescued.
You see, while some often take no action at all, others rush in and act without fully understanding a situation. You see, the reality is that a person needs more than just not slavery. As horrible as the enslavement situation is, the simple truth is that this horrible institution is providing some of the basic physical needs of the child, like food and clothes and things. So as Christians in a situation like this, we need to solve the physical needs, and then we can work on the other needs of a person.
We want to make sure that children, when they age out, will be independent and successful. That's really crucial. The suicide rates among kids that have been trafficked and have gone through abuse like this are extremely high compared to the normal population. And
Wow.
But we find that in our programs that hasn't been the case because of the job training and because of the Christian community with which these kids graduate with.
When you're trying to solve a problem like child slavery, you're looking for the long-term solution. The goal of every good nonprofit should be to try to work itself out of existence someday. The goal is to end child slavery forever in each person's life. And that means educating, caring for, and spiritually nurturing the child. By approaching the problem this way, you aren't just pulling one child out of slavery. No, instead you're pulling an entire generation out of slavery. Not just this kid, but this kid's kid, and this kid's kid's kid, and so on. And then you empower each person to be a part of the solution themselves.
So if we aren't preparing the children who graduate to have better lives than the dollar a day, because their children are being set up to end up as slaves. And so that's one of the reasons why this core commitment is so important to us is these graduates. And one of the amazing things that attracted me to this ministry was the graduates themselves. They give back. So upon graduation, they're earning more than their parents would make, and they're living in situations where they're in Christian community, and so they are tithing back to see other kids rescued from slavery, to see other kids who've been rescued cared for. And so over the last 5 or 6 years, we've seen 500 graduates give back over $400,000, which is so amazing when you think about these
standard of livings and those things. Yeah,
it's amazingly sacrificial.
When we as Christians begin to solve these issues, oftentimes the task seems too big for us. We look at a situation and think, I'd love to do something about that, but I just don't think I ever could. But really, that's exactly how we should feel, because in reality, we can't. When Praveen was walking home and saw a child in the trash, he would have never dreamed that he was about to be used to save thousands of children. Had he thought about it right then and there, no doubt the task would have seemed way too big. Instead, he was simply faithful in the moment to do the right thing. There was a child placed in his path that needed help, and so he cared for her. In your life, simply remain faithful to always do the small things. Help those you can, and leave the big picture to God.
And the needs that we see in India, millions of children in slavery, thousands of kids locally near our campus needing to be rescued, desperate situations of poverty, and only God, I think resigning yourself to that only God can do what needs to be done, and resigning yourself is maybe a really bad way to say that, but in my pride, or in what can drive that I can do it all, and learning that only God is going to be the one that accomplishes the building of a children's home, or the expansion of vocational training programs, or any of these things that that we want to provide for these children, that we think that God wants to provide for these children, is something that He has to do. And we have seen miracle after miracle in terms of God introducing us to people who they want to connect and they want to fund what we're doing, and sometimes that's a miracle of someone who gives $25 a month, and sometimes that's someone who gives big money year after year after year.
Sure.
And that's an amazing aspect to what we do. And you read George Mueller, and you see how God cares for orphans, and those things are still happening today as well. And I think that is it comes back to God being big and strong and powerful, and being able to do far more than we can imagine with the abundance of God's economy.
George Mueller was a frequently unemployed preacher at a small church. God put it on his heart to care for the orphans of the city, and within his lifetime, he had a multi-building complex and facility that cared for 20,000 orphans. As you go throughout your day, look for the needs that you could meet. Has God placed an unbeliever in your path? Then share the gospel. Has God placed a crying person in your path? Then talk to that person. Be faithful in these small things. That's how big things are accomplished. It's not by big people or big men or big women. Big things are accomplished when people take action to help those in our path. Now, quick word of warning. George Mueller and Praveen did not set out to make a name for themselves. George Mueller did not start out by saying, I'm going to make my name a household name in Christian homes for the next century. No, he simply sought to do the will of the Lord as it pertained to the lowliest of individuals around him. It's the parable of the talents from Matthew 25. We were not saved merely so that we can live out our lives wasting each moment in amusement and entertainment. We were not blessed so that we just grow on our own personal spirituality. We should grow personally, spiritually, but that's not the end of it. That's the mistake of the person who took the coin and just kept it. Our Lord calls that wicked and lazy. No, we continue living after we're born again so that we can be doers of good in this world now. Be faithful to do for others all you can now. If you are in the area of Greenville, South Carolina, then there's one easy way you can help out Child Freedom specifically. On October 5th, they are hosting a 5K walk-run at Furman. It starts at 8:30. My wife and I are planning to be there. You can register for this event by going to childfreedom.org and then clicking the banner along the top of the page. That's childfreedom.org. Thanks so much for listening. This concludes this particular dispatch from the front lines of the Lord's Army. If you want more information or content, like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter and on Instagram, and subscribe to us on YouTube. Apply what you have learned in this episode. Remember, you do not become a great man or woman in Christ without taking action. One easy way you can help spread the gospel right now is by subscribing to our podcast on whatever platform you're listening on. Also, just by liking us and leaving us a review, you can have a massive impact in how many people we reach. Go out there, take action, join the battle. LordsArmy.org.